Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum and I am here today at the Dutch National Military Museum taking a look at a few of the guns that they have in their extensive and a very cool collection. And this one is a really interesting variation on what we would think of as an HK rifle, but this isn't actually made by HK. This is a Rheinmetall produced G3 rifle that was standard issue for the Indonesian Air Force. Now, the story of the G3 goes back to 1959 when the German, well, it goes back well before that, but we'll take it to 1959 when the German military adopted the rifle, or wanted to adopt, the SETME as the G3 rifle for German military service. The German government wanted its rifle production to be domestic, which is part of the reason they were even looking at the SETME. They had previously just adopted the FAL as the G1 rifle, but FN hadn't been willing to let them produce it in Germany. So they were looking for something they could actually build domestically. And they negotiated with NWM to get production rights in Germany. They basically gave NWM a bunch of German Air Force contracts in exchange. And then the German government assigned production of the G3 to two different companies, Rheinmetall and HK. Now there's a deep and intensive story behind this, and we're just going to skim over the very top of it. Basically, Rheinmetall's production quality wasn't up to the right standards. The guns had some problems. Rheinmetall eventually would leave production of the G3. They would take over the MG3, the machine gun, instead. HK would become the predominant rifle manufacturer in Germany. Before that happened, though, Rheinmetall was making G3 rifles not just for the Germans, but also for export. And a number of different countries adopted them. Burma or Myanmar adopted them. And also, a little-known variant of them was adopted by Indonesia. This has a collapsing metal butt plate, very much like the G3A4, which we wouldn't see until the 1970s, but this one was manufactured sometime between 1959 and 1961. Now, the reason that we have this rifle here is this was, as I said, used by the Indonesian paratroopers. They were dropped into Papua New Guinea as part of Indonesia's attempt to basically take control of Papua New Guinea during the period in the very early 1960s when it was trying to achieve independence. It was separating itself from Dutch colonial oversight. The Dutch were trying to help facilitate Papuan independence. The Indonesians wanted that territory, and Indonesian paratroopers ended up on the island, or in the country, fighting. The Dutch supplied their own fighting force there as well, and they also supplied the Papua Volunteer Corps, a group of domestic native folks for their own self-defense. We previously took a look at a Papua New Guinea Volunteer Corps Mauser. Well, those guys were armed with Mausers. The Indonesian paratroopers had select-fire G3s. There was quite an imbalance there. But the Papuans did capture a number of these rifles, and that's how this one ended up here in the Dutch Military Museum. So let's take a closer look at the folding or the collapsing stock mechanism and the markings that make this a bit distinctive from an HK-produced rifle. So here on the magazine well, we have G3. That diamond in the circle is Rheinmetall's mark, and then the serial number on this particular rifle is 10,595. I suspect that the Indonesian rifle serial number range began at 10,001, and they probably ordered something like 1,000 guns. I've seen one other that was, I believe, serial number 577, so it may not have even gotten to 1,000. It was not a huge order, and it's a very poorly documented order. There's not much information out there about it. This pentagon is the Indonesian Air Force standard symbol. You'll see that on their aircraft as well, and that's on there because this was specifically used by Indonesian paratroopers. And being paratroopers, they of course needed a reasonably compact rifle, which is why they had this folding or collapsing stock option. So in order to close that, we're going to take the button here, push that in, and then the stock collapses in. So very similar to what the Germans would adopt later and HK would produce, but about 10 years before HK did it. We do also have some additional markings on the trigger group, and I can't fully translate what these all indicate. However, these are Indonesian, I believe SAU is Indonesian Air Force. Not sure about CIE. That 7, I'm going to go out on a limb and guess is a unit marking, probably a company marking. And then I don't know about this. This is clearly related to the serial number. It is a 3-position selector, so it is safe, semi-auto, and full auto, typical of a G3. At the front end, we have a couple of interesting characteristics for folks who are interested in HKs, because these have a very different style of muzzle device to the HK. Front sight block is also different. And that's because these are very early production guns. So these were being produced at around the same time that the German military was still testing the guns out. In fact, we have a couple of HK guns also from the same time period, a pair of 1959 guns that are German trials guns. And if we look at the muzzle brake on those, you can see that it is the exact same style. One of the other features, this would show up on various types of G3s. Some companies and some militaries wanted it and some didn't. That is the integral folding bipod. The Indonesian paratroops did use it, and I'm going to presume that they did that because for paratroops, one of these rifles on a bipod in full auto would take over the role of a light machine gun if a proper light machine gun was too heavy or too awkward to jump with. So they had the bipods. The Germans did also experiment with the exact same bipod. So here is an HK-produced German trials rifle with, you can see, the exact same style of bipod, same muzzle device. Now this one has an open front sight here and a carry handle. Those were not features that were adopted by the Indonesians. However, you can see this indentation in the handguard is a relief for a carry handle. So Rheinmetall was making one set of handguards that were inletted for bipod legs, inletted for carry handles, and you could put those on any rifle and they'd work whether they had those extra features or not. Note that the Indonesian guns have a fully enclosed front sight, which is also a feature that the Germans experimented with. This is another example of a different 1959 HK-produced trials gun, and you can see it also has a fully enclosed front sight. On this one, we've got that same style of muzzle device, but a wooden handguard, no carry handle, and no bipod. To go along with that fully enclosed front sight, the Indonesians and everybody else at this point was using a 2-position rear aperture, just an L-shaped flip sight. You have a 200 meter and a 300 meter aperture on that. One other just interesting element to point out here, these of course, being very early G3 rifles, both use steel magazines, and the German trials gun has an HK magazine, and the Indonesian gun has a Rheinmetall magazine. They are both dated, so there's our September of 1959 G3 HK production mag, and there is that diamond in a circle for Rheinmetall, and this one is actually a 1961 magazine. So the exact date that Indonesia acquired these guns, I'm not sure of. 1961 on the magazine does make sense, and that's probably the magazine that this rifle was captured with, because it was captured, brought back, and ended up in the museum here. It's unlikely that it probably would have had a magazine swapped, certainly for another Rheinmetall mag. By 1963, this whole conflict was pretty much over. The Indonesians had won. The Papua Volunteer Force was really no longer a substantial military operation, and so these rifles would have been out of, well, they would not have been captured by Dutch forces anymore at that point. So if you're interested in the G3, there really is a lot more to it than just HK's production. If you go back to the early days of the rifle, there's a lot of test versions for the German military. You have Rheinmetall's export production, and interesting guns like this. So hopefully you enjoyed taking a look at this one and the really kind of, in the US at least, very unknown story of what was going on in Papua New Guinea in the early 60s. If you enjoyed this sort of rifle, 2 things you should do. First is you should absolutely take the opportunity, if you have it, to visit the National Military Museum here in Holland. And if you liked seeing this sort of thing on the internet as well, take a look at my Patreon page if you have a moment. It is support from folks there at $1 a month that makes it possible for me to travel to places like this and bring you interesting guns like this one. Thanks for watching.